Hello everyone in CIS-115 and welcome to week 7 of module 4 is where we're starting. Uh, module 4 covers a lot of stuff. It covers scope, loops, and input and output. So this week we're covering scope. And a lot of folks have trouble with scope. It's really just about the scope of variables, as you can see here on the checklist. So what that means is where you can see a variable, where you can change it, and those types of things. So you'll see these rules over and over again when we start talking about scope, and that is formal parameters belong in, function names belong out, and you can see out but you can't see in, what they call the tinted windows rule. So let's look at the scope of variables lecture. This is a textual lecture, and the purpose of this video is just to kind of make it close to what we do in the classroom. And that presents a few challenges, because normally when I do this, I mark the items on the whiteboard in the classroom. So I've worked hard to find another way of presenting this. Hopefully it'll work well online, so let's give it a try. So here's the lecture on scope, and you can see they've kind of expanded those 3 rules a little bit, but they're basically 3 rules that are applied. It's just they've gone into more detail with them here. So let's try this first example in Tawny, and you'll see that this program blows. This is the program right here. It will blow with an error saying that it can't see one of the variables. And let's see if you can figure out why. So we'll paste that into Tawny and run it here. So what this program consists of is it's got an A function, it's got a new function, and it's got a function call to run the new function. And that's it. So in this program we've got 3 scopes. We've got the global scope, and scope in Python really has to do with where things are indented or not indented, as the case may be here. So the global scope contains everything that's outdented all the way to the left. We have a scope for new, and we have a scope for A. So down at the bottom of this lecture, they've got the recap that has the 3 scope rules again. But let's run this program, and you can see that it's blowing, it's not running, and it's saying that the variable name value is not defined. And if we click on this blue underline, you can see it takes and marks the line where the trouble happened. And so Python is telling us that you asked me to print a variable name value, but as far as I can see, there is no value. There's no variable name value here. So why is that happening? Well, it's happening because of the scope rules, and specifically the tinted windows rule that's number 1 here, that says you can see out but you can't see in. So we're in this new function here, and we're trying to print. We're trying to print the variable value, but because it's inside of this A function, we can't see it. So Let's put this into draw and we'll see where the scopes are in a more graphical way here. So draw. This is the best that I can do without a whiteboard. So we'll put a text box in here. And then we'll paste that code in. And we can change the font to make it a little bit bigger. Maybe I'll go to 32. Okay, so here's our program. Where are the scopes again? Well, let's draw them. We have a global scope that encompasses the whole program. And we can change the transparency here so you can kind of see it. And we'll just stay with blue. So this is our global scope in blue here. We also have two other scopes. We have the scope of A and we have the scope of new. Now in some of the homework and things, they will put comments in here to identify what scope they're talking about. But let's go ahead and put finish drawing these scopes. Okay, and we'll make this one red and change the transparency. Okay, so we've got that scope, and then we've got one more scope here. And that's this scope. And we can make that one green. Okay, so there's our three scopes. There's our three scopes in the program. The global scope, the new scope, and the A scope. So let's talk about what is visible and where. Visible in global scope. And most of the time what's visible in global is the same thing as what's defined in global. But so visible in global, we have this A function and the rule for function names. If you recall, it says here number 2 there in recap, it says function names go out. So the function name A is out there in the global scope. New is a function and its name goes out, so that's it. That's all we have. That's all we have in the global scope. We also have things that are defined in global. And those are exactly the same in this case. The A function is defined in global, and the new function is defined in global. And that's it. That's all that's defined, and you can see that what is defined in global is exactly the same as what is visible. Now that changes a little bit with these others. So let's try this. Visible. What can we see if we're inside the A scope? So if we're inside the red, we can see value because it's in there with us. We can see A. Why can we see A? What's the rule with function names? They go out. So A is out here in the blue area. If you want to think of this as cars and a sidewalk, you can kind of start visualizing what's going on. We have this blue area that's the whole area, sidewalk and everything. We have this red area that is, you want to use the analogy of a car, this red car with tinted windows. So we're right now talking about what's visible inside the red car. We can see the variable value. The function name goes out, so if we're in a car with tinted windows, we could see somebody on the sidewalk. And so we can see A because A is a function name and it's out in the global scope. Same thing, we can see new. New is a function name, and it is function names are variables, as it'll tell you in the lecture. So that's what we can see when we're in A. What's defined in the A scope? Well, there's only one thing that's defined in A, and it's value. That's the only thing that got created inside the red car. Okay? Visible in the new scope, that's the green car. What can we see if we're in new? We can see A and we can see new. Why can we see A and new? Because both of those are function names. They go out of the car onto the sidewalk out here. So we can see A and we can see new. Defined in the new scope, nothing is defined. Okay, so can you see why our program's blowing? When we tried to run it, we're in here in the green car. We're trying to look into the red car that has tinted windows. We can't see anything in there, so we can't see value, and that's why this program's blowing. So we'll save that as our example 1 from our lecture. Example 1 dot. This is a drawing ODG. Okay, so how could we fix this? Well, if we do this, value equals 0, is that going to fix it? Well, it'll fix the error that we're having about value not being defined, but it's not going to give us what you think. You'd think we have created value here, and here we're changing it to 100, and here we're going to print it. Well, let's just see what prints. 0 is printing. Now, if you read the lecture and the textbook, you'll see that there's something called shadowing. And shadowing is basically if we have a variable that's in an outer scope, and that, remember that value now would be being created out here in the blue. If we have a value that's out there, or a variable that's out there in the blue, and then we do this inside of the red scope that we had right here, then we just created another copy of value. Okay, so we've got a copy of value that's only alive inside of the red scope, and then here we're actually getting to the value that's out there in the global scope. So even though we did value equals 100, it only changed it for a value variable that's only alive inside of the A scope. And also, inside of A, since we did this, we can never get to value on the outside. So there is a way to fix that if you ever need to do this. there's something called the global modifier. And if we do this, what that says is it says create a copy of the variable value, put it out there in the global scope, and allow me to change it inside here. Now, if I tried to change it inside of new, I wouldn't be able to, but I can change it here where I did the global. So now I think this program will do what everybody expected it to do to begin with, and that's print value is the 100 for value on this line. So let's run it, and you can see we're getting a 100 out. So that's the first example here in the lecture. Now let's do another one, and that's this program right here. Okay, and we'll talk about where things are available in that program. So we'll go back to Tawny here, clear everything out, and paste that in. So as you can see now, they're identifying this is scope 1, this is scope 2, and what is scope 3 here? It's outdented all the way to the left, so scope 3 is our global scope. Global scope. So let's talk a little bit more. What is Z right there? This is the function signature right here. This is the function signature, and whatever's inside these parentheses is a formal parameter. And if you read the rules there again, it says formal parameters go in. So that means that Z is a variable inside scope 1, just like A. And here Y is a formal parameter, so it goes in, and it's a variable inside of scope 2, just like B. So let's draw the scopes here and talk about them. So I'll copy that, and I'll go to draw again, and we'll create our new drawing. And in our new drawing, we'll make ourselves a text area here and paste that code in, and we can make the font a little bit bigger. Okay, so here's our text area. Let's start drawing scopes. So again, always, I guess, start out with the global scope is a good place to start. So we'll draw a global scope here. Okay, so we've got a global scope here. We'll change the transparency. And that's our global scope, scope 3. Next, let's draw scope 1. Okay, this is scope 1, and we can make it red again if you want to. Boy, that's a bright red. Okay, that's scope 1. And now let's draw scope 2. And we'll make that the green scope. How's that? Our green car. So we have our 3 scopes identified here. So let's start talking about what variables are available where. And I'm getting it where we can see our scope rules down here. Right there's our scope rules. So we'll put a text area here in here where we can type. Okay, so what can we see? What's visible in scope 3? So that means if we're in the blue, what can we see? Well, W is in blue with us, so we know we can see W. F is a function name. The rule says function names go out, so we can see F if we wanted to call ourselves. If we were inside this function or outside, we could call ourself and run our own function. G is a function name and it goes out. So W, F, and G. And that's what we can see if we're out here in the blue on the sidewalk, so to speak. We can see W, we can see the red car, we can see the green car, and that's it. Defined in scope 3, as we said most of the time with global, defined and visible are the same thing. So W, F, and G, because W is defined, it's created right here. F is defined, function names go out, it's defined in a global scope. G, function names go out, it's defined in a global scope. So that's everything there in the global scope. Now let's talk about what we can see visible in scope 1. So if we're in the red car that has tinted windows, what can we see? Well, Z is a formal parameter, and formal parameters go in, so we can see Z. We can see A, because A is a variable that's created in there with us. What's the rule for function names? Function names go out, so we can see out, and F is out there on the sidewalk. G is a function name, it goes out, so that's what we can see in scope 1. Now what was created, defined in scope 1? What was defined in scope 1? Well, Z, formal parameters, go in, and A, and that's it. Visible in scope 2. So now we're in the green car. Question is, what can we see when we're in the green car? Well, we can see Y. Y is a formal parameter. It comes in. Formal parameters go in. Okay. We can see B. B is created inside the car with us. We're in this car. We can see out. So we can see W. And also up here, we missed one. We can see W in scope 1 too. Here's scope 1, W is sitting up there. So Y, B, W, and what else? We can see F and G. We're in this green car. Function names go out. So F and G are out here in the blue along with W. So we can see Y, we can see B, we can see F and G and W. Okay? defined in scope 2. What's created in the green scope? Two things. The formal parameter y, that's right here, says formal parameters go in, and b is a variable. It's created inside that scope. So that's everything for that example. Let's see if what we said matches what's in the lecture. Okay, define in scope 3, WF and G, WF and G. Visible in scope 3, WF and G. Scope 1, Z and A are defined. That's what we had right here, Z and A. Visible in scope 1, WF, Z, and A. WF, Z, and A, and G are visible. Yeah, G's there. Okay. And so defined in scope 1, two things we said were Z and A, and Z and A is what it says here, right there. So, okay. So lastly, scope 2, we have Y, B, and W, and F, and G. Down here, visible in scope 2, they had Y and B, W, F, and G. Y and B, W, F, and G. And lastly, Y and B are defined in scope 2. So that's example 2, and we'll save that. As example 2. Okay, so that's fairly easy as long as you draw it out and you can remember those 3 scope rules right here. Okay, those rules. Where it gets a little bit touchy is where you have a function inside of a function, because you still have to apply these rules. So I'm going to go to the homework, and here is a homework item that it gave me. Okay, I'm going to paste that into a new drawing and we can work it. Change the text size to be 32 points. Maybe that's a little big. Might need 26. Okay. So just to make it valid Python code, not that we're doing anything in draw, but put a comment there in front of it. Okay, so there's our program. We need to identify the scopes. So let's draw them just like we did before. Okay, so we've got our global scope that's gonna basically be everything. Okay, and we'll change the transparency on that. Okay, so there's our global scope, which is scope 1. You see how they're identifying it. This line is outdented all the way to the left. So that scope 1 is our global scope. Scope 2, if you'll notice, has a function inside of it. So Python's one of the few languages that lets you define a function inside of a function. So let's go ahead and draw that. And we can color that. Let's see. How about we color that yellow? Okay, so that's scope 2. And then we have a third scope that is the function g. So we'll identify that one. We'll make that one red. Okay, so there are 3 scopes. The question is, variable g is visible in which scopes? We're going to have to apply our rules that we had in the lecture or also in the checklist. There are the 3 rules right there in recap. So, where can we see G? Well, you have to understand that where is G defined and where is it in the scopes? G is the name of this function, and the rule with function names is they go out. So G is out here in scope 2, just like A and B. So where can we see G? So let's think about it. Where can we see G? G is visible. Okay. Well, obviously if G, the function name G, goes out into scope 2, it's visible in scope 2. Okay. It's visible in scope 2. If we're inside of scope 3 and we have our red car here has tinted windows, we can see out into scope 2. And we just got done saying that G, the rule is function names go out, so G is out here in scope 2, so we can see it in scope 3. So right now we know that we can see G when we're in 3 and in 2. But what if we're out here on the sidewalk? G is inside this green car that has tinted windows. So if we're out here in the blue, we cannot see in to this green car. So we will never be able to see the variable G. G cannot be seen in scope 1 because of tinted windows rule. Okay? That's the way you apply those rules. Now, they could ask this question a lot of different ways. They could have said G is defined where? If they ask it that way, then you have to know the rule, function names go out, so G goes out. G is actually defined in scope 2. Okay? Let's ask ourselves another question. What variables are visible in scope 2? So we're in the green. What can we see? Can we see out to see this variable Z? Yep. In the green car, we can see out. So we can see Z. F is the name of a function. Function names go out. So this F function's name is actually out there in scope 1. So we can see F. If we're in scope 2, we can see F. And we already said that. Okay. If we're in scope 2, we can see G, because G, the rule is it goes out. We can see G, it's in there in scope 2 with us. Okay. We can see X. X is a formal parameter, so X comes in. Remember, formal parameters go in, so X is in there with us. Okay. We can't see into this red car, so we can't see the variable R and M, so we cannot see R and M when in scope 2. Because we're outside here in the green, we're trying to look into this red car that has tinted windows, and we cannot see R and M sitting in there on the seat. So that's your scope lecture. Remember that you need to draw this stuff out, you need to apply these rules, and you need to pay careful attention to whether things are indented or not. And you also need to make sure that you're looking at what word they're saying here, whether they're saying visible or defined, because it changes the answer. So key off of that word visible or defined when you're doing the homework and the exam. So that's the end of the scope of variables lecture. I'm sure you'll have questions. Feel free to email